She stood in the post office doorway at noon, and the whole town pretended not to see her face. Grace Holloway kept her right hand in her coat pocket, even in the heat. The bruises had faded from purple to that sick yellow-green that made people look away faster than fresh blood ever did. Her lip had healed crooked where it split. The postmaster slid her mail across the counter without meeting her eyes. Behind her, Darla Ferguson whispered to her daughter. The girl stared. Grace took the stack, bills mostly, and one red envelope she knew meant final notice, and walked back into the white glare of Carrizo Wells. Summer. The asphalt shimmered like water that would never cool you. She didn't look back. Heat pressed down on her shoulders like hands. By the time she reached her trailer, 3 people had crossed the street rather than pass her on the sidewalk. Cole Brennan found her in the dirt behind Chen's General Store 3 days later, and for 5 seconds he thought he was looking at Sarah again. His truck had thrown a belt 2 miles out, and he'd limped it into town on a prayer and bad timing. Ruby Chen kept tools in back. He was halfway around the building when he heard glass break, then a sound like someone trying not to make a sound. That caught gasp when pain goes past what you can hold in. Grace Holloway sat against the cinder block wall, left hand pressed to her right forearm where blood ran dark between her fingers. Broken mason jar at her feet, her face, her face, lifted toward him with the eyes of a cornered animal. "Don't," she said. "Don't touch me." Cole stopped 6 feet back, hands where she could see them. "Ma'am," he said, kept his voice level. "You're bleeding." "I know I'm bleeding. Looks deep." "I said don't." The back door opened. Ruby came out fast, saw the situation, read it in half a second. "Grace, honey." Ruby's voice shifted into something Cole had heard her use with scared dogs. "Let me see." Grace's breathing was too quick, too shallow. Ruby moved in slow, the way you approach something that might bolt. She knelt, took Grace's wrist gentle as prayer. "Cut's clean," Ruby said, "but it needs stitches. You gotta go to the clinic." "No." "Grace, I'm not going there. Mallory's—" She stopped, looked at the blood on her palm. "They're friends. Wade and the deputy. You know that." Ruby's jaw set. She looked up at Cole, still standing there with his hands out like he was stopping traffic. "County clinic's an hour north," Ruby said. "They don't ask questions if you pay cash." Cole heard himself say, "I can take her." Both women looked at him. Grace's eyes went hard. "Why?" "No reason," Cole said. Lied so smooth he almost believed it himself. "Truck's here anyway." "Yay." Ruby stood, pulled Grace up with her. "You can say no, honey, but that cut's not stopping on its own." Grace swayed, steadied, looked at Cole like she was memorizing his face in case she needed to identify him later. "Fine." Voice flat. "But I sit by the door." The drive north was 90 minutes of silence so thick Cole could taste it. Grace pressed herself against the passenger door, right hand in a dish towel rubied wrapped, left hand gripping the door handle. She wore one work glove on her right hand, leather, women's size worn soft from use. The left hand was bare, pale against the red-soaked cloth. Cole kept his eyes on the highway. Heat made the road look liquid. "You don't have to explain," he said once, about 20 miles in. "Good." That was it until the clinic. The nurse was tired and kind. Asked if Grace wanted to file a report. Grace said no. The nurse looked at Cole, assessing, then back at Grace. "You got somewhere safe to go?" "I'm fine." The nurse held her eyes a beat longer, then nodded. "Suite 3. Cole waited in the lobby. 72 minutes, by the wall clock? Read the same poster about diabetes 4 times. When Grace came out, her arm was bandaged elbow to wrist, and she looked smaller somehow, like the stitches had let something out along with the blood. At the desk, the receptionist said, "Oh, that'll be $240. Grace's face went blank. Cole pulled cash from his wallet, 300s, left them on the counter. The receptionist counted back change. Grace watched his hands. Outside, the sun was lower, but the heat hadn't broken. Grace stopped beside the truck. "Why'd you do that?" Cole opened the passenger door, waited. "Do what?" "Pay, drive me, any of it." He didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie, so he said nothing. She studied him, searching for the angle, the trap, the cost, then climbed in. The drive back was different. Not warm exactly, but the silence had room in it now. 10 miles from Carrizo Wells, she said. "You knew it wasn't an accident." Wasn't a question, so Cole didn't answer. "Everyone knows," she said, quiet, looking out at the desert. "They just pretend they don't." "Yeah. You're not from here. Ranch about 15 miles west. Don't come to town much." "Why today?" "Truck broke." He glanced at her. "Bad timing, or good, depends." She almost smiled. "Didn't quite make it." "On what?" "On whether you're glad you got help or mad you needed it." Grace looked at him then, really looked, like she was seeing past the weathered face and gray threaded hair to something underneath. "I don't know yet," she said. He pulled up to her trailer as the sky went orange. Grace opened the door before he'd fully stopped, then hesitated with one foot on the running board. "Why'd you do this?" "You already asked that." "You didn't answer." Cole's hands were still on the wheel. He could feel them shaking, had been shaking since he'd seen her against that wall, bleeding and broken and looking so much like Sarah that for a moment he'd forgotten how to breathe. "You okay?" Grace asked. The question caught him sideways. When he looked up, she was watching him with something like recognition. "Yeah," he said. "I'm good." Another lie. She knew it. He knew she knew it. "I manage," she said, got out, stood there a moment in the dying light. "Thanks for the ride." She walked to her door without looking back. Cole sat in the truck and watched her go inside, watched the lights come on behind cracked blinds, watched the screen door bang shut against a frame that didn't quite fit. 5 minutes later, he was still sitting there, hands locked on the wheel, trying to remember how to start the engine, trying to remember Sarah's face the way it had been before the fire, instead of the way it looked in his dreams, trying not to think about how badly he'd needed to save someone today, anyone, even a stranger who didn't want saving, even someone who might not survive the weight of his guilt. He showed up the next morning with fence wire and no explanation, and she almost slammed the door in his face. Grace stood in the doorway at 6:15, still in the oversized t-shirt she'd slept in, bandage on her arm already showing a spot of red where she'd moved wrong in the night. Cole Brennan was in her yard, holding a coil of wire and a bag of fence staples, his truck idling behind him, like he'd only planned to stay a minute. "What do you want?" Her voice came out harder than she meant, or maybe exactly as hard as she meant. "Morning?" He gestured toward the fence line with his chin. "Got 3 posts down on your east side. Coyotes will get in." She looked past him. The fence, chain link and rot, half of it held up by rust and habit, sagged in 3 places she'd been meaning to ignore. One post leaned at 45 degrees, wire pulled loose from the frame. "I didn't ask you to—" "I know." "Well, then why—" "No reason." He was already turning away, walking toward the fence. "Won't take long." Grace stood there, hand on the doorframe, trying to decide if this was kindness or something with a bill attached. Men didn't do things for free. Men didn't show up at dawn unless they wanted something. But he was already working, kneeling in the dirt, pulling the loose wire free, not looking back at her, not waiting for permission, or thanks, or whatever it was he really wanted. She should tell him to leave. She closed the door instead, not slammed, just closed. By 7:30, the heat was building and Cole's shirt was dark with sweat. Grace watched from the kitchen window while coffee percolated on the stove. Watched him work the fence staples with steady, methodical precision. Watched him reset the leaning post, pack dirt around it with his boot heel. His hands were scarred, old cuts from wire and leather, the kind of hands that had been working since they were young. He didn't look toward the trailer. Didn't expect anything. That bothered her more than if he'd knocked and asked for water. When he finished the second post, she took a glass from the cabinet, filled it from the tap, stood there holding it like it weighed 50 pounds. "It's just water," she told herself. "Doesn't mean anything." But everything meant something. She pushed the screen door open. The bang made him look up. "You want water or not?" she called. He straightened, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Appreciate it." Grace walked down the 3 wooden steps, careful not to jar her arm, crossed the dirt yard. Up close, he smelled like work and dust and something else. Soap, maybe, or just clean sweat. Nothing like Wade's stale beer and cigarettes and rage. She handed him the glass. Their fingers didn't touch. He drank it in 4 long swallows, handed it back. "Thank you. You didn't have to do this." "I know." "So why—" She stopped, shook her head. Never mind. But she didn't walk away. They stood there in the building heat, 6 feet apart, not looking directly at each other. The desert stretched out around them, empty and patient. A hawk circled somewhere high up where the air was cooler. "How's the arm?" he asked. "Hurts." You keeping it clean?" "I'm not an idiot." "Didn't say you were." Grace studied him, the weathered face, the gray in his hair, the careful distance he kept. He was probably 50, maybe older, old enough to know better, old enough to have learned that nobody helped without wanting something back. "You do this a lot?" she asked. "Fix things for people?" "Not really." "Then why me?" Cole looked at her then, really looked, and for a second something moved behind his eyes. Something old and heavy and far away from this yard, this morning, this conversation. "No particular reason," he said. She knew he was lying. She could taste it. But she didn't call him on it. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable exactly, but waited, like they were both waiting for the other to say the thing that would make this make sense. A dust devil spun up in the distance, red dirt climbing toward the white sky. They both watched it move across the flats, following its own logic. "Used to see those all the time," Grace said. "When I was a kid, thought they were magic." What do you think now?" "That they're just wind?" She looked down at the empty glass in her hand. Everything's just something else, once you know how it works. Cole bent, picked up his tools. Fence should hold now. Keep an eye on that far post, though. Might need replacing. I don't have money to... Didn't ask for money. Then what do you want? The question came out raw. She hadn't meant to ask it like that. Hadn't meant to ask it at all. But there it was, hanging in the heat between them. Cole looked at her. His face was quiet, unreadable. Nothing you gotta give, he said. He left the tools by his truck, drove away without looking back. Grace stood in the yard holding the empty glass until the dust from his tires settled. Then she went inside and checked the door lock. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. The screen door banged behind her in the morning wind. That evening she found them on her porch rail, his work gloves, the leather ones he'd been wearing, brown and sweat-stained and shaped to someone else's hands. He must have forgotten them, or left them on purpose, which was worse because it meant he'd have to come back. Grace picked one up. The leather was soft from years of use, warm from sitting in the sun all day. She turned it over, studying the worn places where his fingers gripped at tools, where wire had cut through and been patched. Her own glove was in the kitchen drawer, the right one, the only one she had left. She'd lost the left one that night, the night Wade's hands had found her throat and she'd clawed at the dirt, trying to get away. Lost it somewhere in the dark, between his truck and the fence line, where Cole had found blood 3 days ago. Lost it, along with a lot of other things that probably weren't coming back. The memory came fast and sharp, Wade's face above hers, his breath. The sound of her own voice saying please, like that word had ever meant anything to him. Her hand reaching for something, anything. Grace dropped Cole's glove. Her heart was hammering. The bandage on her arm had started to itch. She could feel Wade's hands even though he wasn't here, hadn't been here in weeks. Might never come here again if the restraining order Ruby'd helped her file was worth the paper it was printed on, which it probably wasn't. She went inside, left Cole's gloves where they were. The trailer was hot and close. She opened a window, but the air outside was hotter. The box fan in the corner pushed the heat around without cooling anything. Grace lay on the couch, good arm over her eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. It's just gloves, she told herself. Just leather. Just someone forgetting something. But things weren't just things anymore. Everything meant something. Every knock on the door could be Wade. Every truck engine could be his. Every man's kindness could be the start of something that ended with her on the ground again. The screen door banged. Once, twice. The wind was picking up. She should get up and fix the latch. Ruby's husband had shown her how before he died. It was just a screw and a bent piece of metal. She could do it herself, but she didn't move. The door kept banging, that hollow metal sound that meant nothing was sealed, nothing was safe. Everything could get in if it wanted to bad enough. Grace closed her eyes, tried to remember what it felt like to not flinch when someone moved too fast. Tried to remember being a person who could accept a glass of water from a stranger without wondering what it would cost her. Tried to remember the girl she'd been before Wade, before the bruises, before the whole town decided silence was easier than helping. That girl was gone. Grace knew that. Buried somewhere out by the fence line with the left-hand glove, and a dozen other things she'd never get back. But maybe Cole Brennan didn't know that yet. Maybe he still thought she was someone who could be saved. Outside, the wind picked up. The screen door banged harder. And somewhere in the desert, a coyote started calling, answered by another, then another, until the whole empty world was full of voices that sounded like grief. Ruby hired her back at the diner, and the first person who walked in was the deputy who'd done nothing. Grace had the coffee pot in her hand when Deputy Frank Mallory took his usual stool at the counter. 7:30 a.m., Tuesday. 3 weeks since Wade had put her in the dirt, and Mallory had written it up as a domestic disturbance, without pressing charges or asking if she needed help or doing any goddamn thing except filing paperwork that went nowhere. Morning, Grace. Like nothing had happened. Like her face wasn't still healing. Like he hadn't looked the other way while Wade drove off laughing. She poured his coffee without answering. How you been? Grace set the pot down harder than she meant to. Met his eyes. Fine. Good. That's good. He dumped 3 sugars in, stirred slow. Seen Cole Brennan's truck out your way a few times. He bothering you? Every muscle in her body went tight. No. Just checking. Wade was asking. Wade's got a restraining order. Piece of paper, Grace. Mallory sipped his coffee. Can't stop a man from asking questions. Ruby came through from the kitchen, took one look at the situation, and stepped in smooth as silk. Frank, your eggs are going to be cold if you keep running your mouth. She dropped a plate in front of him. Eat. Mallory smiled, all teeth, no warmth, and picked up his fork. Grace turned away before he could see her hands shaking. 2 hours later, Ruby sent her home early. You're white as a sheet, honey. Go rest. We're slow anyway. Grace didn't argue, walked the 8 blocks back to her trailer in heat that was already pushing 100. Her arm ached under the bandage. Her head felt like it was full of sand. Cole's gloves were gone from the porch rail. She'd meant to bring them inside yesterday, meant to do a lot of things, but she'd left them there all night, and now they were gone. And she told herself it didn't matter. He probably came and got them. It was fine. It wasn't fine. She went inside and checked the lock. 3 times. Down from 4. Progress, maybe. Or just exhaustion. 15 miles west, Cole Brennan was walking his fence line, checking for brakes when he saw it. The glove was caught in the barbed wire about 3 feet off the ground, hung up like something that had tried to escape and failed. Women's work glove, left hand, leather worn soft from use, stained dark, mud or blood or both, and weathered from months of sun and rain. He stopped walking, stood there in the dust and heat, staring at a piece of leather that shouldn't have meant anything. It was hers. He knew that without knowing how he knew. Same style as the right-hand glove she'd been wearing in his truck. Same size, same wear pattern. The mate to the one she still had. This was where it happened. His fence line ran along the eastern edge of her property, 1/4 mile from her trailer, far enough that no one would hear, dark enough at night that no one would see. Cole reached out, careful, worked the glove free from the wire. The leather was stiff in places, soft in others. He turned it over in his hands, tried not to think about how it got here, tried not to imagine her reaching for something, anything, while Wade's hands found her throat, tried not to see Sarah's face instead of Grace's, Sarah's body instead of hers, Sarah calling him while he sat drunk and useless and 3 hours too late. He folded the glove, put it in his jacket pocket, started walking back to his truck, then stopped, turned around, walked back to the exact spot where the glove had been. There was nothing else there. No blood. Rain had washed that away months ago. No marks, no evidence. Just dirt and wire and the empty desert stretching out in all directions. But this was the place. This was where Grace Holloway had learned that screaming didn't help and the law didn't care, and the only thing that mattered was whether you could get up after. Cole stood there a long time. Then he walked back to his truck, drove home, and spent 20 minutes at his kitchen sink washing a glove that didn't belong to him. He used dish soap and cool water, worked the stains out gentle, the way his mother had taught him to treat leather that needed saving. Dried it with a clean towel, set it on the counter to finish drying while he made coffee he didn't drink. The glove sat there in the afternoon light, left hand palm up like it was waiting for something to hold. He drove back to her place after dark, didn't knock, just left the glove on her porch rail next to where his work gloves had been, stood there a moment in the cool night air, looking at her trailer, lights on behind cracked blinds, flicker of a TV, sign of life, and wondered what the hell he thought he was doing. Saving her? Saving himself? Saving someone who didn't exist anymore because he'd been too drunk and too slow to pick up the phone? Cole got back in his truck, drove home the long way, windows down, radio off. Tried not to think about the fact that he'd just returned evidence of someone's worst night to them, like it was a lost earring or a dropped wallet. Tried not to think about Sarah, failed on both counts. Grace found it the next morning. The left glove sat on her porch rail exactly where Cole's work gloves had been 2 days ago. She stood in the doorway staring at it, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. He'd found it, somehow. The one she'd lost. The one that had been out there in the dirt and wire and dark for 3 months, like evidence she couldn't bury, and he'd washed it. She could tell from 10 feet away. The leather was clean, soft again, shaped back into something that looked like it might fit a hand instead of a nightmare. Grace set her coffee down, walked onto the porch, picked up the glove with fingers that weren't quite steady. It smelled like dish soap, like someone had taken time, like someone had cared. She was still standing there when his truck pulled up. Cole got out slow, giving her time to go inside if she wanted. She didn't move. "You put that there?" Her voice came out rough. "Found it by the fence line." Silence. The morning was already hot. "That's where it happened, isn't it?" Cole said it gentle, not asking her to confirm, just stating what he already knew. Grace's throat went tight. "Don't. I'm not asking you to talk about it." "Then why?" She looked down at the glove in her hands. "Why would you bring this back?" "Just thought you might want it back." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why do you keep—" She stopped, started again. "What do you want from me?" Cole stood there in the dust and early light, hands in his pockets, face quiet as prayer. "Nothing," he said. "Bullshit. Nobody does this for nothing." "You got somewhere you need to be right now?" The question threw her. "What?" "Coffee on your porch is probably cold by now. I could use a cup if you're making more." Grace stared at him. "You want coffee? If you're offering." She almost laughed. Almost. "You're out of your mind." "Probably." But she turned and went inside, left the door open, came back 2 minutes later with 2 mugs, and sat down on the porch steps like she was testing whether the wood would hold her. Cole sat 3 feet away, took the mug she offered. They drank in silence while the sun climbed and the heat built, and somewhere out in the scrub, a morning, Dove called. "You got family?" Grace asked finally. Long pause. "Had a sister." "And had?" Cole looked into his coffee. "Fire, 12 years ago." Grace waited. When he didn't say more, she said, "I'm sorry." "Yeah." More silence, but different this time. Shared. "You?" Cole asked. "Grandmother raised me. She died when I was 19. Grace traced the rim of her mug. "Nobody else worth mentioning." "That why you stayed?" "Stayed where?" "Here, with him, when it got bad." Grace's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about—" "You're right, I don't." Cole set his mug down. "And I'm not asking." She looked at him, really looked, trying to figure out what he was after, but his face gave nothing away except maybe exhaustion, the kind that lived in your bones. "Why do you care?" she asked. "I don't know." The honesty of it caught her off guard. They sat there while the sun got higher and the morning burned away. When Cole stood to leave, Grace said, "The fence looks good. Might need to check that far post in a few weeks. I don't have money to, didn't ask for money." He walked to his truck, then paused. "You need anything? I'm around." He left before she could answer. Over the next week, a pattern formed. Cole would show up, not every day, but often enough that Grace stopped jumping when she heard his truck. He'd fix something small, check the fence, tighten a loose board on her steps. She'd make coffee sometimes. They'd talk in fragments. Never about Wade, never about why. Ruby noticed. Of course Ruby noticed. "That rancher's sweet on you," she said, Friday afternoon at the diner. "He's just fixing things." Ruby wiped down the counter. "You know Mallory's asking questions." Grace's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that mean Wade's asking him to ask." Ruby's voice went hard. "You be careful, honey. We're not, I know, but Wade doesn't. And Frank Mallory does what Wade tells him." That night, Grace went home and checked her door lock. Once, twice, 3 times, down from 4, progress. Saturday evening, she found herself in the kitchen drawer looking at her right glove, the one she'd kept. She pulled it out, then got the left one from the counter where she'd left it drying after washing her hands. Grace sat at her small table and put both gloves in front of her, left hand, right hand, matched pair, complete. She reached out, traced the worn leather with one finger, picked up the right glove, put it on. The fit was familiar, comfortable. She picked up the left, held it, but didn't put it on, not yet. Outside, the screen door banged once in the evening breeze. Just once. The wind was gentle tonight. Grace sat there in the fading light, one glove on, one glove held, and thought about a man who washed leather like it mattered, who fixed fences without being asked, who'd lost someone too and carried it quiet. She thought about Deputy Mallory's warning, in Wade's shadow, in the way the whole town had looked past her, bruises like they were weather nobody could control. She thought about being alone versus being lonely and whether there was a difference anymore. The left glove sat in her right hand, waiting. Grace set it down on the table, stood up, went to the window. Cole's truck wasn't there, hadn't been there all day. But she found herself looking anyway, found herself disappointed, found herself terrified of what that meant. Wade showed up at the ranch on a Saturday morning, and Cole knew exactly why he'd come. The sound of the truck was wrong, too loud, too aggressive, engine revving like a threat before it even cleared the cattle guard. Cole was in the barn checking water lines when he heard it. He set down his wrench and walked outside. Wade Holloway's Dodge Ram sat in his yard, lifted suspension and chrome gleaming in the sun. Wade got out slow, deliberate. Stone, sober, that was the first bad sign. Drunk Wade was mean but sloppy. Sober Wade was calculating. "Help you?" Cole kept his voice level. Wade smiled, closed the truck door with a soft click instead of a slam. "Heard you been spending time with my wife." "Ex-wife." "We ain't divorced." Wade took 3 steps forward, stopped. "Still legally married. That makes what you're doing, what's the word? Interference." Cole didn't move. "That's between you two." "Well, no." Wade's smile went cold. "It's between you and me now. You've been at her place. Ruby Chen's got a mouth on her, tells anybody who'll listen. You fixing her fence, drinking coffee on her porch, playing hero. Just helping a neighbor. Bullshit." Wade took another step. His hand drifted toward his belt. No gun visible, but the gesture was clear. "You think you're some kind of white knight. Gonna save her?" Cole stayed quiet, waited. "She tell you her side of things?" Wade asked. "Bet she did. Bet she played the victim real good. Grace is talented that way." "I'm not interested in—" "She was cheating on me." Wade said it flat. Matter of fact. "Found out in like February. Confronted her about it. She admitted it, told me to my face. Cole felt something shift in his chest. Not belief, but the smallest sliver of doubt. And when I told her we were done, Wade continued, voice getting harder, when I told her to pack her shit and get out, she came at me with a kitchen knife. You believe that? I had to defend myself. Had to remind her who she belonged to. And the way he said it, calm, reasonable, like he was explaining something obvious, made Cole's skin crawl. You're lying. Am I? Wade tilted his head. She show you the scars on my arm where she cut me? No. Bet she didn't mention that part. Cole's hands had formed fists without him noticing. He forced them open. You need to leave, he said. Wade's smile widened. Or what? You gonna hit me, old man? Go ahead. Give me a reason to press charges. Give me a reason to go back over there and finish what she started. The threat hung in the air between them. Cole took a breath. Another. Made himself stay still when everything in him wanted to put Wade face down in the dirt. Get off my property. Wade held his ground another 5 seconds. Then he stepped back, hands up in mock surrender. Stay away from her, Wade said. This is your only warning. Next time I won't be so friendly. He got in his truck, revved the engine twice, kicked up a rooster tail of dust driving out. Cole stood there long after the sound faded. Stood there with Wade's words circling in his head like vultures. She was cheating. Came at me with a knife. He didn't believe it. But a part of him, the part that had failed Sarah, the part that knew how badly you could misread a situation when you wanted to help, whispered, what if there's more to the story? He went to the diner that afternoon, told himself he was just getting lunch, told himself it was nothing. Grace was refilling the napkin dispensers when he walked in. She looked up, saw his face, and something in her expression shifted. What happened? She asked after the last customer left. Cole sat at the counter, took off his hat, set it down careful. Wade came by the ranch this morning. Grace went very still. What did he say? Nothing worth repeating. Tell me. Cole looked at her, at the fading bruises, at the way she held herself like someone expecting impact, and hated himself for what he was about to do. He said there was more to the story. The color drained from her face. You believe him? No. But? The word hung there, that one syllable that meant everything. But what? Grace's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. Cole stopped, started again. I don't know what happened. You never told me. I don't owe you my trauma. I know. I'm not asking, you think I did something? Her hands were shaking. You think I deserved it? No. Christ, no. Get away from me. Grace, I said get away from me. She turned and walked to the back. The kitchen door swung shut behind her with a soft whoosh of air. Cole sat there for a long moment. Then he stood, left a 20 on the counter, walked out into the heat. Ruby came out from the kitchen as the door closed behind him. What the hell did you do? She asked Grace. Grace was standing at the prep sink, hands braced on the metal edge, breathing too fast. Nothing, she said. I didn't do anything. But she had. She'd let herself trust. Let herself think maybe, just maybe, someone saw her as something other than damaged. And now even Cole doubted her. Grace went home early for the second time that week. Walked the 8 blocks with her head down, ignoring the looks from people who'd watched her get beaten and done nothing, ignoring the whispers that followed her like flies. The trailer was an oven. She didn't open the windows. Both gloves were still on the kitchen table where she'd left them last night. Right hand and left hand. Matched pair. Evidence of someone's care. She looked at them for a full minute. Then she grabbed them, both of them, and shoved them in the drawer, hard. The drawer stuck halfway. She yanked it open and slammed it shut again, again until something inside cracked. The gloves disappeared into darkness. Grace stood there breathing hard, hands on the counter. Outside, the wind was picking up. The screen door started to bang, soft at first, then harder. That hollow metal sound that meant nothing was sealed, nothing was safe. She'd been so stupid. Thinking Cole was different. Thinking anyone would believe her without proof. Thinking the gloves meant something other than, here's the evidence of your worst night. Cleaned up and handed back like it's a gift. Her arm hurt where the stitches pulled. Her head hurt. Everything hurt. She sank down onto the kitchen floor, back against the cabinets, and pulled her knees to her chest. The screen door banged and banged and banged. The wind was getting stronger, storm coming. She could smell it in the air. That metallic tang that meant lightning and rain. In the desert getting washed. Clean for about 5 minutes before it all went back to dust. Grace closed her eyes. Tried to remember what it felt like to be someone worth believing. Tried to remember what it felt like before Wade's fists and the town's silence. And Cole Brennan's 1-second hesitation that told her everything she needed to know. She was alone. She'd always been alone. And she'd been a fool to think leather gloves and fixed fences could change that. The storm hit 20 minutes later. Rain came down in sheets, turning the dust to mud hammering the trailer roof like fists. Thunder cracked so close the walls shook. Grace stayed on the floor. The screen door banged and banged and banged until something in the hinge gave way, and it hung crooked, slamming irregular now, broken. She didn't get up to fix it. What was the point? Everything broke eventually. Everything. Ruby found him sitting in his truck outside the diner at 2 a.m., and when she knocked on the window, he couldn't remember how long he'd been there. 3 days since the fight. 3 days since Grace had told him to get away from her and meant it. 3 days of Cole driving past her trailer at night, not stopping, not knocking, just checking to make sure the lights were on, making sure she was breathing, making sure he hadn't failed again. Ruby tapped the glass harder. "Cole, roll down the window." He did. The night air was cool for once, almost cold. "What are you doing here?" Ruby asked. "I don't know. You look like hell." He probably did. Hadn't shaved in 3 days, hadn't eaten much. Sleep came in 20-minute increments before Sarah's face would wake him up, or Grace's, or some horrible composite of both. "Go home," Ruby said. Not unkind, just tired. "I can't." Why not?" Cole stared at the steering wheel. His hands were shaking. Had been shaking for 3 days. "I should have saved her," he said. Ruby's expression shifted. "Grace? Cole, you tried. She's the one who—" "Not Grace." His voice cracked. "Sarah, my sister. 12 years ago." Ruby went very still. Then she walked around the truck, opened the passenger door, and climbed in. "Tell me," she said. It came out in pieces. Fragments. The way truth does when it's been buried so long it's fossilized. Sarah had been 23. Living in Flagstaff with a boyfriend everyone knew was bad news. Danny something. Cole couldn't remember his last name anymore, just his face, just the way he'd look at Sarah when he thought no one was watching. "She called me that night," Cole said. "October 14th, 10:30. I was 3 beers in, watching football." Ruby didn't say anything, just listened. She said, "Can you come get me?" And I could hear it in her voice. Something was wrong. She was scared. He stopped, made himself continue. "But I was drunk, and it was a 2-hour drive. And I told her—" His throat closed. "I told her to call me in the morning, that we'd figure it out tomorrow." The truck cab was silent except for the sound of Cole's breathing. "There was a fire," he said. 2 a.m. Their apartment. Danny locked the bedroom door from outside. They found her by the window. She'd been trying to get out. Ruby's hand found his shoulder, squeezed. The fire marshal said it was electrical, bad wiring, but Danny's cigarettes were all over the place. And Sarah didn't smoke, and everyone knew he'd been drinking that night. Everyone knew. Cole's voice had gone flat, numb. They ruled it accidental, closed the case. Danny moved to California a week later. Jesus, Cole. I should have gone. If I'd just gotten in the truck. If I'd been sober. If I'd... He stopped. I was 3 hours away. Could have made it in 2 if I'd driven fast. She called me at 10:30. The fire started at 2. That's 3.5 hours. Ruby's grip tightened. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. The boyfriend killed her, not you. I was supposed to protect her." Cole finally looked at Ruby. His eyes were wet. "She asked for help and I said tomorrow. And there wasn't a tomorrow." "Oh, honey." "And now, Grace..." He stopped, shook his head. "I don't know what she is. I just know I can't fail again." Ruby was quiet a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Cole, that's not help, that's penance. And she can feel the difference." The words hit like a fist to the chest. "You're not trying to save Grace," Ruby continued. "You're trying to save Sarah. And Grace knows it. Women always know when they're standing in for someone else." Cole's hands were still shaking. He gripped the wheel tighter. "I don't know what else to do." "You could start by forgiving yourself." "I can't." "Then you can't help her either." Ruby opened the door. "Go home. Get some sleep." "And Cole?" "Yeah?" "Stop driving past her place at night. She's seen you. You're scaring her." Ruby climbed out and closed the door soft. Cole sat there another 10 minutes. Then he started the truck and drove. But he didn't go home. The cemetery was on the north edge of town, up a dirt road that hadn't been graded in years. Cole hadn't been here since the funeral. 12 years of staying away. 12 years of telling himself it was too hard. He wasn't ready. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. Sarah's grave was in the back corner, under a cottonwood that had grown taller since he'd last seen it. The headstone was simple. Just her name and dates. 23 years, that was all she got. Cole stood there in the pre-dawn gray, hands in his pockets. "Hey, kid," he said. The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves. That was all. "I'm sorry." His voice sounded strange out loud. "I should have come. You called, and I should have gotten in the truck right then. Should have driven fast, should have been there. And a coyote called somewhere in the distance. I've been trying. He stopped. Started again. Met someone. She's in trouble, like you were. And I thought maybe if I could help her, maybe it would mean something. Fix something. Prove he wasn't what he knew he was. But I screwed it up, Cole said. She needed me to believe her, and I hesitated. Just for a second, but that was enough. He knelt down, put his hand on the cold stone. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Don't know how to... His voice broke. I'm so tired, Sarah. I'm tired of carrying this. Tired of waking up and remembering you called and I said tomorrow. The cottonwood leaves rustled. The sky was getting lighter in the east. I'm not a good man, Cole whispered. I'm just a coward who's tired of being one. He stayed there until the sun came up, until the heat started building, until his knees ached and his back hurt and he had to stand or fall over. When he walked back to his truck, he left something behind. Not the guilt, that was permanent, but maybe the belief that he could make up for it. Maybe the fantasy that saving one person could unsave another. Maybe the lie he'd been telling himself for 12 years that if he just tried harder, worked longer, helped more, someday he'd deserve to stop hating himself. 15 miles away, Grace Holloway sat on her kitchen floor and finally told the truth. Not to anyone. There was no one left to tell. Just to the empty trailer, to the broken screen door banging irregular in the wind, to the gloves she'd pulled from the drawer and now held in her lap. I wasn't cheating, she whispered. Her voice sounded strange in the silence. Small, like it belonged to someone else. I told him I was leaving, that's all. Just that I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't live like that. The gloves sat heavy in her hands, right and left, matched pair. It was February. We were in the kitchen. I'd packed a bag, had it by the door, and I said... She stopped, made herself continue. I said, I'm going to Ruby's. We can talk about the divorce when you're sober. Outside, thunder rolled in from the west, storm coming back, or maybe it had never left. He grabbed my arm, right here. Grace touched the place above her elbow where the bruises had been, where they'd faded, but never really gone. And he said, You're not going anywhere. And I said, Let go. And he didn't. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the gloves tighter. So I grabbed the knife. The one I'd been using to cut vegetables, it was right there on the counter, and I held it between us. Not threatening, not trying to hurt him. She made a pushing gesture with one hand. Just making space, just trying to breathe. The rain started, soft at first, then harder. He backed off, looked at me like I'd betrayed him. Like I was the monster, Grace's voice cracked. And then he smiled, and he said, You just made a big mistake. She could see it so clearly, Wade's face in the kitchen light. The way his expression had shifted from rage to something worse. Calculation. He left, just walked out. I thought, she laughed, hollow. I thought I'd won. The screen door banged, once, twice, a rhythmic. He came back 3 hours later, found me at the fence line, checking the posts, trying to fix them before I left. And Grace stopped. Couldn't say it. The words wouldn't come. But her hands remembered, her throat remembered. The dirt and the wire and the sound of her own breathing, getting smaller and smaller until it almost stopped. When I woke up in the dirt, the glove was gone, the left one, and Wade was gone. And I lay there watching the stars and thinking, I'm alive, I'm still alive. Thunder cracked close. The lights flickered. He told everyone I attacked him first, that I came at him with a knife for no reason, that he had to defend himself, and they believed him. Her voice went hard. Deputy Mallory saw the knife, saw the cut on Wade's arm where I'd nicked him trying to push him back. Saw my face 3 days later when the swelling went down enough that I could go outside. She looked down at the gloves in her lap, and Mallory said, Sounds like a mutual combat situation. Best if both parties just stay away from each other. Like I'd started it. Like defending yourself makes you guilty too. Grace picked up the right glove, put it on. The leather was warm from her hands. The whole town knows. They just decided I'm as bad as he is. Decided we're both at fault. She picked up the left glove, held it. That's why no one helped. That's why they crossed the street. Not because they're scared of Wade. She slipped the left glove on, both hands now, complete. Because they think I'm dangerous. The gloves fit perfectly, worn to her hands, shaped by years of work and one night of survival. Grace held her hands up in front of her face, turned them over, looked at the leather that had touched dirt and blood and wire, and been lost, and been found, and been washed clean by a man who didn't know the full story. Who'd believed Wade's lie just enough to hesitate, just enough to prove what she'd always known. I defended myself, she said to the empty room, to the storm, to no one. And they made me the criminal. She lowered her hands, let them rest in her lap, both gloved, both whole, and started to cry, not the quiet kind. The kind that came from somewhere so deep it had no bottom, The kind that bent her forward until her forehead touched her knees and her shoulders shook and sounds came out that didn't have words. The kind that said, I survived and it didn't matter. I fought back and they blamed me. I'm still here and I'm still alone. The rain hammered the roof. The screen door banged and banged. Lightning turned the kitchen white, then dark, then white again. And Grace Holloway cried on her kitchen floor with both gloves on and no one coming to help. Miles away, Cole Brennan stood in his kitchen holding a cup of coffee he couldn't taste. The sun was up. Morning light came through the window, harsh and unforgiving. He'd driven home from the cemetery an hour ago. Hadn't slept, couldn't. On the counter, next to the coffee pot, was the photograph he kept face down most days. Sarah at 20. Before Danny, before the fire. Smiling at something off camera, her whole life ahead of her. Cole picked it up, looked at his sister's face. I failed you, he said. The house was silent. And I'm failing her too. He set the photo down, pressed his palms flat on the counter. His hands had finally stopped shaking, or maybe he'd just stopped noticing. Ruby's words circled back. That's not help, that's penance. Maybe she was right. Maybe he'd been trying to save Sarah through Grace, trying to rewrite history by fixing someone else's present, trying to prove he was someone worth forgiving by being someone worth trusting. But Grace didn't need his guilt. He didn't know what she needed. He'd never asked. He'd just assumed, projected, tried to rescue her the way he'd failed to rescue Sarah. And in doing that, he'd made her feel exactly like what Wade had made her feel, like she was a problem to be solved instead of a person deserving belief. Christ, Cole whispered. He'd asked her to explain herself, to justify her trauma, to prove she was worth helping. He'd done exactly what the rest of the town had done. Demanded evidence before offering humanity. The coffee cup sat untouched, going cold. Outside, the storm that had hit Grace's trailer 15 miles east was moving his direction. Dark clouds building, wind picking up. Cole looked out the window at his land. The cattle, the fence line, the empty acres that stretched to the horizon. He'd built a life out here alone. Told himself it was what he deserved. Told himself isolation was penance. But maybe it was just fear. Fear of failing someone else. Fear of being seen as what he knew he was. A man who'd said tomorrow when someone needed him today. Thunder growled in the distance. Cole picked up his keys. He didn't know what he was going to say to Grace. Didn't know if she'd even open the door. But Ruby was right about one thing. Penance wasn't help. And if he was going to fail again, and he probably was, at least he'd fail trying to do the right thing for the right reason. Not for Sarah, for Grace. Because she'd asked him to believe her, and he hadn't. And that was on him. The heat broke on the 7th day, and for the first time in weeks, Grace could breathe. She woke to cool air coming through the window she'd finally opened. No storm today. Just clear sky and a temperature that didn't feel like punishment. The kind of morning that made you think about going outside. Grace lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to nothing. The screen door didn't bang anymore. The hinge had broken completely 2 days ago, and now the door just hung there, crooked and silent. She should fix it. She should do a lot of things. But instead, she got up, pulled on jeans and boots, and walked out into the desert. There was no plan, no destination, just the need to be somewhere that wasn't the four walls of her trailer with their peeling paint. Accumulated silence. Grace walked east, away from town, following the fence line that marked where her rented land ended and the BLM acres began. The ground was still damp from yesterday's rain. Her boots left prints in the mud that would bake hard by noon. Saguaro stood sentinel in the distance. Creosote bushes smelled sharp and clean. A roadrunner crossed her path 30 yards out, didn't even look back. She'd forgotten what this felt like. Just walking. Just being outside, without fear pressing down like a hand on her chest. The sky was huge. So blue it hurt to look at. No clouds, no mercy. Just that endless Arizona, nothing that made you feel both infinite and invisible at the same time. Grace kept walking. She didn't realize where she was going until she got there. The fence line, the exact spot. 3 posts, one still leaning despite Cole's repairs. Barbed wire strung between them, catching the morning light. This was where the left glove had been, where Cole had found it months after. Where Wade had... Grace stopped 10 feet away. Her heart was hammering. She could leave, turn around, walk back, pretend she hadn't come here, but she didn't. She walked forward until she was standing right there, right where it had happened, where she'd clawed at dirt and wire and tried to breathe through Wade's hands and thought, this is how I die. Except she hadn't died. She'd gotten up, eventually. When Wade had finally let go and driven away and left her there bleeding and broken, but alive, she'd gotten up and walked back to her trailer and locked the door and survived. Grace looked down at the ground. No blood left. Rain had washed it away months ago. No evidence. Nothing to mark the spot except memory. Just dirt and wire and sky. She stood there for a long time. 5 minutes, 10, breathing. and realized something. This place didn't own her anymore. It was just ground, just fence posts and wire and creosote, just geography. What had happened here was real. The bruises were real. The terror was real. The way the whole town had looked away was real, but she was still here, and Wade wasn't. And this patch of dirt, this specific spot that had been the center of her nightmares for 3 months, was just dirt. She was bigger than it. She'd always been bigger than it. Grace sat down on a flat rock about 20 yards from the fence. Not running, not hiding, just sitting. The sun climbed higher, the air started to warm. A hawk circled somewhere overhead, riding thermals she couldn't see. She thought about Cole Brennan, about his quiet voice and careful distance, about the fence he'd fixed without being asked, about the glove he'd found and washed and returned like it mattered, about the way he'd hesitated when she'd asked if he believed her. That hesitation had felt like the end of the world, like proof that no one would ever see her as anything but damaged. But sitting here now, watching the hawk circle, Grace wondered if maybe she'd read it wrong. He'd hesitated. Yes. But then he'd said no. He'd said he didn't believe Wade's lie. And before Wade had poisoned the well, Cole had spent 2 weeks showing up, fixing things, asking nothing, believing her without needing the story. That was more than anyone else had done, more than Mallory, more than the town, more than anyone. He'd believed her before knowing what happened. That was the part that mattered. And she'd thrown him out because of 1 second of doubt. 1 second. Grace picked up a small stone, turned it over in her hands, warm from the sun, smooth from wind and time. Maybe he'd been wrong to ask. Maybe she'd been right to be angry. But maybe she'd also been so scared of being hurt again that she'd hurt him first. Maybe she'd been protecting herself. Or maybe she'd just been giving up. The hawk was still circling, patient, waiting for something to move in the brush below. Grace watched it and thought about choices. She could stay out here, stay alone, stay safe. Never let anyone close enough to doubt her or leave her or fail her. Keep her door locked and her gloves in the drawer and her heart somewhere nobody could reach it. That was protection. Or she could go back, face the town that had judged her. Face Ruby, who'd tried to help. Face Cole, who'd tried and failed and maybe wanted to try again. That was risk. Am I protecting myself? She said out loud to the desert. Or am I just giving up? The hawk didn't answer. The desert didn't answer. The fence post stood silent and indifferent. But Grace already knew. Giving up was easier, safer, simpler. But she hadn't crawled away from Wade's hands and survived 3 months of silence and put on both gloves yesterday just to give up now. She stood, brushed dust off her jeans. The hawk finally dove, fast, precise, and came up with something small struggling in its talons. Life and death. Hunter and hunted, the desert's oldest math. Grace started walking, not deeper into the emptiness, not away from the world, back, toward town, toward people, toward the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she deserved more than survival. Maybe she deserved to be believed without having to earn it. Maybe she deserved kindness without suspicion. Maybe she deserved a man who washed her glove like it mattered and fixed her fence because it needed fixing and said ma'am like it meant I see you. And if it didn't work out, if Cole left or failed or turned out to be just another man who wanted something she couldn't give, at least she'd know she tried. At least she'd know she hadn't let Wade win by making her too afraid to live. By the time Grace got back to her trailer, the sun was high and hot again. The cool morning was gone. Heat shimmered off the ground in waves. Her legs ached. Her throat was dry. She'd walked maybe 6 miles total. Far enough to remember she had a body that worked. That moved. That was hers. The broken screen door hung crooked. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she went inside, found her toolbox under the sink, and spent 20 minutes fixing the hinge. It wasn't perfect. The screw holes were stripped, and she had to use bigger screws to make it hold. But when she tested it, the door closed, smooth, stayed closed, didn't bang, silence. Real silence. Not the kind that came from breaking, the kind that came from fixing. Grace stood there looking at her handiwork, one small thing made right, and felt something shift in her chest. Not healing, not yet. Healing would take time, but something. A beginning, maybe. Or just the end of pretending she was already finished. That evening, she sat on her porch steps and watched the sun go down, orange and pink and purple, spreading across the sky like a bruise in reverse, getting prettier instead of worse. Cole's truck didn't come up the road. She told herself she didn't care, told herself it didn't matter. But her eyes kept going to the horizon where dust would rise if anyone was driving this direction. And when the sun finally set and the stars came out and no headlights appeared, Grace went inside and checked her lock. Once, just once. Then she pulled the gloves from the drawer, both of them, and set them on the kitchen table where she could see them. Not wearing them, not yet ready for that, but not hiding them either. They sat there in the lamplight, left hand and right hand. Evidence of someone's care, evidence of her survival, evidence that maybe, possibly, there were still things in this world worth reaching for, Even if your hands shook. Even if reaching meant risking. Even if you'd been hurt before and might get hurt again. Grace turned off the light and went to bed. And for the first time in 7 days, she slept through the night. Wade came to the diner on a Thursday afternoon with a gun in his belt and a smile that made Ruby reach for the phone. Grace was refilling sugar dispensers when he walked in. She felt him before she saw him. That animal sense that told you when a predator entered the room. Her hands stopped moving. The sugar dispenser sat half full, white crystals spilled on the counter. Grace. Wade's voice was pleasant, casual, like they were old friends catching up. She turned kept the counter between them. He looked good, clean-shaven, sober, wearing a pressed shirt and jeans without stains. The gun sat on his right hip, holstered, legal, but there. A reminder. A promise. "We need to talk," he said. "No, that's not how marriage works. We're not married. Court says different." Wade pulled out a stool, sat down like he owned the place. "Got the restraining order thrown out yesterday. Judge said there wasn't enough evidence. Said it sounded like you and me just needed some time apart to cool down." Grace's stomach dropped. "You're lying. Call Mallory if you don't believe me." Wade smiled wider. "Oh, wait. He's the one who testified on my behalf. Said you'd been acting erratic. Said you came at me with a knife. Said maybe you needed help more than I needed jail." Ruby moved closer to Grace, phone in hand. "Wade, you need to leave." "Ruby Chen." Wade nodded to her. "How's business? Heard that new Denny's out on the highway's taking a lot of your breakfast crowd." I'm calling the sheriff." "Go ahead. I'm not breaking any laws, just talking to my wife." "Ex-wife," Grace said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Not legally." Wade leaned forward on the counter. "That's what I came to tell you. We're still married, still bound. Till death do us part, remember?" The way he said it, "till death," made Grace's skin crawl. "I want you to come home," Wade continued. "We'll forget all this, forget the rancher, forget the stories you've been telling. Start fresh." "No." "Grace, I said no." Wade's smile thinned. His hand drifted toward his hip. Not touching the gun, not yet, just hovering. "You're embarrassing me," he said quietly. "Made me look like a monster. Made the whole town think I'm some kind of—" He stopped. "You and that old cowboy. Everyone's talking. Saying you're whoring yourself out for fence repairs." Ruby stepped forward. "That's enough." "Is it?" Wade stood. The stool scraped loud against the linoleum. "I've been patient. Been giving her space, but there's limits." "Wade, I swear to God." The door opened. Cole Brennan walked in. He must have been in town for supplies. He had that look, dusty jeans, work shirt, hat in hand. He took 2 steps inside before he saw Wade, saw Grace behind the counter, white-faced and shaking, saw Ruby with the phone, saw the gun. Cole stopped, assessed, made a decision. He walked forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady, the way you approach a rattlesnake. Calm, deliberate, showing no fear. "Afternoon," he said. Wade turned. Recognition flashed across his face, then something darker. "The hero arrives," Wade said. "Perfect timing. You need to leave." Cole's voice was flat, empty of everything but fact. "This is between me and my wife. She's not your wife." And she said no. "You don't know anything about." "I know enough." Cole moved until he was standing between Wade and the counter, between Wade and Grace. His body language was clear. "You'll go through me first." Wade's hand moved to his gun, rested there, thumb on the grip. "You gonna stop me, old man?" "If I have to." "With what? You're not armed." Wade smiled. "I am." Cole didn't move, didn't reach for anything, just stood there, hands at his sides, eyes steady. "You gonna shoot me in front of witnesses?" Cole asked, voice still flat. "Ruby's already called the sheriff. They'll be here in 20 minutes. You really want to add murder to assault?" "Self-defense." Wade's thumb moved on the gun grip. "You're threatening me." "I'm standing still. You're in my way. Then go around." The standoff held. 5 seconds. 10. Grace could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Ruby spoke from behind the counter. "Wade, there's 3 customers in the back booths. All of them watching. All of them got phones. You really think you're walking out of this?" Wade looked past Cole, saw Grace. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Cole said. "It is." Something in Wade's face changed. The calculation slipped, the mask cracked, and under it was rage, pure howling rage that had been building for months. "You think you're better than me?" Wade's voice went high, tight. "You think you can just take what's mine? She's mine. He lunged, not for the gun, for Cole. Hands out, going for the throat, the face, anything he could reach. Cole could have dodged. Could have stepped aside and let Wade crash into the counter. Could have put him down easy. Wade was sloppy, off balance, leading with his chin. But Cole didn't move. He just stood there. Wade's fist caught him in the mouth. Hard. Cole's head snapped back. Blood. Immediately. Split lip, maybe broken tooth. He staggered but didn't fall. Wade hit him again. This time the cheekbone. Cole's eyes started swelling, and Cole just took it, hands at his sides. Not raised, not defending, not fighting back, just standing there, taking it. Hit me back! Wade was screaming now. Fight me, you coward. Fight me! Cole stayed still. Blood ran from his nose, down his chin, onto his shirt. No, he said. Wade pulled back for another punch, and Deputy Mallory came through the door. Freeze! His voice cut through the chaos. Wade, step back. Wade froze, fist still raised, breathing hard, eyes wild. Mallory took in the scene. Cole bleeding, Wade standing over him with a cocked fist, 3 customers with phones out recording, Ruby on the landline, Grace white-faced behind the counter. Frank, he attacked me. Wade started. I saw. Mallory's voice was tired. Done. Saw you throw the first punch through the window? Saw him just stand there and take it? He was threatening. He was standing still. Mallory moved forward. Wade Holloway, you're under arrest for assault. That's bullshit. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Wade looked at Cole, at Grace, at the whole room, watching him finally be held accountable. This isn't over, he said. Mallory cuffed him. Yeah, it is. They walked Wade out. His voice carried back through the open door, still arguing, still blaming, still convinced he was the victim. Then he was gone. The diner was silent except for someone in the back booth saying, holy shit. Grace came around the counter, walked to where Cole stood dripping blood on Ruby's floor. His left eye was swelling shut. His lip was split deep. There'd be bruises on top of bruises by tomorrow. But his eyes were clear, calm. Why didn't you hit him back? Her voice shook. Cole touched his mouth, winced. Because then he wins. He wants me to be the villain. He could have killed you. No. Cole looked at her, really looked. He wanted me to fight so he could claim self-defense. So he could make you look like you picked a violent man over him. So he could prove you're the problem. Grace's throat closed. I'm done being what people expect, Cole said quietly. Done proving I'm something I'm not. Done letting fear make my choices. He swayed a little. Ruby grabbed his arm. Sit down before you fall down, Ruby said. She looked at Grace. Get ice. Clean towels, first aid kit. Grace moved on autopilot, brought the supplies, sat down next to Cole at the counter. Her hands shook as she pressed ice to his eye. He flinched, but didn't pull away. You took a beating for me, she whispered. No. Cole's good eye found hers. I took a beating so the truth would be clear. So there'd be no question who started it, so Wade couldn't twist it into something else. Why? He was quiet a long moment, then, because you asked me to believe you, and I hesitated. And that was wrong. Grace's vision blurred. Cole, I don't need you to thank me. I need you to know that I believe you. Believed you then? Believe you now? Should have said it clearer. Should have. He stopped. I'm sorry. The ice was turning pink with his blood. Grace held it there, hand steady now. I'm sorry too, she said. I should have trusted that you were trying. We both screwed up. Yeah. They sat there in the afternoon light, surrounded by witnesses who'd finally seen the truth, Ruby hovering nearby. The diner silent, except for the sound of ice melting and breath steadying and something old finally breaking loose. Outside, a siren started up, Mallory taking Wade to county lockup, taking him away, finally. Grace looked at Cole's battered face and saw something she hadn't seen in months. Not rescue, not pity, just a man who'd stood still when everything in him must have wanted to run. Who'd chosen peace when violence would have been easier. Who'd taken pain so she wouldn't have to carry the weight of more violence done in her name. Thank you, she said. Cole nodded, winced. You're welcome. And for the first time since February, Grace Holloway smiled. Not much, just a little, but real. Ruby's garden needed weeding, and for the first time in 6 months, Grace had both her gloves. She knelt in the dirt between the tomato plants, left hand and right hand wrapped in worn leather that fit like it had always been there. The sun was warm on her shoulders. The smell of earth and growing things filled her lungs. Her fingers found bindweed roots and pulled them free. Slow, careful work that didn't require thinking, just doing. Ruby sat on the back porch with iced tea, watching. Not hovering, just there. You're good at that, Ruby called. Grace sat back on her heels, wiped her forehead with the back of one gloved hand, left a streak of dirt, didn't care. Used to help my grandmother, she said. Before. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Ruby understood what before meant, before Wade, before the violence, before the town's silence, before she'd forgotten what her own hands looked like when they were whole. Grace looked down at them now, both gloved, both working, both hers. The leather was stained with fresh dirt and old memories, the right glove she'd kept. The left glove Cole had found and washed and returned like it mattered. Like she mattered. A truck engine sounded from the front. Ruby stood. "That'll be the supply order. I'll be back." Grace nodded, kept working. But she looked up when she heard the second voice. Deeper, familiar. Cole came around the side of the building carrying 2 bags of potting soil like they weighed nothing. His face was still healing, yellow-green bruises fading the same way hers had. Left eye still a little swollen, split lip turned to scar. He saw her in the garden, stopped. "Afternoon," he said. "Hey." He set the soil down on the porch, stood there a moment, hat in hand, looking at her the way someone looks at something they thought they'd lost. "Your fence holding up?" she asked. "So far." "Good." He nodded, started to turn away, then didn't. "You need any help with that?" Grace looked at the garden, at the work left to do, at her own hands in the dirt. "I'm good," she said. But she smiled when she said it. Cole smiled back, careful because of the lip. "Okay then." He left. Grace went back to weeding. And something in her chest that had been tight for 6 months loosened just a little bit more. That evening, she sat on her porch steps watching the sun sink. Orange and pink and purple, bleeding across the sky. The air was cooling. The desert settling into its brief moment of mercy between day and night. Cole's truck came up the road. She'd been half expecting it, half hoping, not sure which half was winning. He parked, got out slow, gave her time to go inside if she wanted. She didn't move. "You got a minute?" he asked. "I got time." He sat on the steps, not close, 3 feet of space between them, enough distance to feel safe, enough proximity to feel possible. They sat in silence while the colors deepened and the first stars appeared. A coyote called far off. Another answered. "Why'd you do it?" Grace asked. Quiet. "All of it." Cole was still for a long time. Then, "Had a sister, Sarah. Lost her 12 years ago because I didn't act fast enough." Grace waited. She called asking for help. I told her to wait till morning. His voice was steady, empty of everything but fact. "She died that night. Fire. Her boyfriend locked the door." Jesus. And I thought, he stopped, started again. "I thought if I could help you, maybe it would mean something. Fix something, prove I wasn't." He trailed off. Grace understood what he couldn't say. She'd been carrying the same weight, different shape, same burden. "You didn't save me," she said. He looked at her. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or just acceptance. "I saved myself," Grace continued. "You just made sure I wasn't alone while I did it." The words hung there between them. True, clean, simple. Cole nodded slowly. "That's more than I deserved." Maybe." Grace looked out at the desert, at the endless nothing that was somehow full of everything that mattered. "But maybe deserve's got nothing to do with it." She turned to him, met his eyes. "Some things ain't about deserve," she said. "Some things just are." The silence that followed was the kind that held weight, the kind you didn't want to break because breaking it would mean letting go of something sacred. 10 seconds, 20, just breathing, just being, just 2 broken people sitting on wooden steps while the stars multiplied overhead and the desert went dark and quiet around them. Behind them, the screen door sat closed, fixed latch holding, no banging, no broken hinge. Grace's hands rested in her lap, both visible, both whole, dirt under her fingernails from work that mattered. Cole's hands lay on his knees, scarred, capable, still. They didn't reach for each other, didn't need to. The space between them was enough. The silence was enough. The fact that they were both still here, still breathing, still trying, that was enough. The last light died. The darkness wasn't frightening, it was just dark. And in the dark, you could see the stars better. "You okay?" Cole asked. Soft. Grace thought about it, really thought. Felt the answer in her body, the soreness in her knees from kneeling in dirt, the ache in her shoulders from pulling weeds, the cool air on her face, the solid wood beneath her. "Getting there," she said. And it was true. Not tonight, not completely, maybe not for a long time. But healing didn't happen all at once. It happened in pieces, in moments, in choosing to put on both gloves and get your hands dirty, in fixing a screen door, in sitting with someone who understood that silence could be a gift. Cole stood. "I should let you." "You can stay," Grace said. "If you want." He looked down at her. In the starlight, his bruised face looked gentler, older, human. "You sure?" "No." Grace smiled, small, real. "But I'm trying." Cole sat back down. They stayed there until the moon rose. until the coyotes stopped calling, until the night went from new to deep to nearly morning. And when Grace finally went inside, she didn't check the lock, just closed the door soft, hung up both gloves on a hook by the window where the morning sun would find them, lay down and closed her eyes, and knew, not hoped, not wished, but knew she'd be okay. Not tonight, maybe, but soon.